You walk into a room, and no one notices. You speak, and people look past you. What if I told you? It's not because they don't care. It's because your brain is telling them to ignore you. This is the real psychology of being invisible. A crisp autumn breeze funneled between the skyscrapers of Manhattan, carrying the scent of roasted coffee from a nearby cart. Ethan Parker adjusted the collar of his blazer, tightened his grip on his leather messenger bag, and stepped off the curb onto Fifth Avenue. Around him, the city surged forward. Suits, sneakers, earbuds, coffee cups, everyone in their own world. Ethan's destination was a glass-walled cafe in Midtown, where a networking brunch was already underway. He stepped inside, the hum of conversation hit him like a wall. Laughter, clinking cutlery, and the rapid-fire exchange of names and credentials. He smiled, approached a pair of professionals chatting near the entrance, and said warmly, "Hi, I'm Ethan." But before he could finish, one of them glanced at his watch, muttered, "Excuse me," and moved away. The other gave him a polite nod and turned back to her phone. The rejection wasn't loud, but it cut just as deep. Determined not to give up, Ethan scanned the cafe for an opening. He spotted a half-empty table where 4 people were engaged in an animated discussion about a new AI startup in Silicon Valley. Sliding into the empty chair, he waited for a pause in the chatter, then said, "Hey, I'm Ethan Parker, But his introduction was sliced in half when a tall man with perfect hair jumped in. "Speaking of AI, did you guys hear about—" The group leaned toward him, laughing and nodding, their energy magnetized by his confidence. Ethan sat back, stirring his coffee, trying not to feel invisible. That afternoon, Ethan rode the elevator up to his 23rd floor office. 2 colleagues stepped in, both familiar faces from marketing. He smiled. "Hey, how's your day going?" One muttered good without looking up. The other didn't even glance his way, eyes locked on her phone screen as the elevator hummed. The doors slid open, and they walked out without a backward glance. The silence in that metal box had said more than words ever could. As dusk fell over Manhattan, Ethan met his old college friend Sarah in Central Park. The fading sunlight turned the trees to gold, the city skyline glowing in the distance. They sat on a bench near the Bethesda fountain, where tourists snapped photos and street performers played soft jazz. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "It's like I'm invisible, Sarah. At work, at events, even in elevators. People don't hate me. They just don't see me." Sarah listened, her eyes steady. "Ethan, it's not that they're being rude. You're blending in. You're not giving their brain a reason to focus on you. Think of the brain as a security filter. Every second, it's bombarded with thousands of sights and sounds. To protect itself from overload, it ignores almost everything. Only what feels important, emotionally, socially, or for survival, makes it pass the filter." Ethan frowned. "So, I'm forgettable?" Sarah's tone softened. "Right now, yes. But that's not who you have to be. Presence isn't luck. It's a skill." That night, walking home under the glow of street lamps, Ethan's mind wandered back to Boston in his middle school years. He remembered raising his hand in class, waiting for the teacher to call on him. But she never did. He remembered being picked last for basketball, standing awkwardly on the edge of the court. He thought adulthood would be different. But maybe the habit of being overlooked had followed him all the way here. In his small apartment overlooking the East River, Ethan sat at his desk, a blank notebook open in front of him. He began to write, "Maintain eye contact. Speak slower and with weight. Stand tall, shoulders back. Give value before asking for it. He stared at the list, realizing it wasn't about pretending to be someone else. It was about amplifying the version of himself that had been hiding in the shadows. The next morning, Ethan walked into a cozy cafe on the Lower East Side. When the barista asked for his order, he smiled, met her eyes for a second longer than usual, and said, "Large cappuccino, and keep the change." There was a flicker of surprise in her expression, followed by a genuine smile. As he took his cup, she said, "Hope your morning's great, Ethan." For the first time in weeks, he felt seen. That evening, Ethan attended another business mixer. Same type of crowd, same high-energy atmosphere. But this time, he didn't rush his introduction. He approached people with open-ended questions like, "What's the most exciting thing you're working on right now?" He listened intently, nodding, adding thoughtful follow-ups. People stayed in the conversation. Some even introduced him to others. The difference wasn't the suit he wore. It was the presence he carried. For the first time in a long time, the room was starting to notice him. 1 week later, Ethan found himself in a sleek, glass-walled boardroom in Boston. The table was polished to a mirror finish, the kind where you could see every detail of your own nervous hands. A dozen people sat around it, laptops open, coffee cups steaming. Ethan was halfway through presenting his marketing strategy when a senior partner, a tall man with a voice like gravel, interrupted mid-sentence. The old Ethan would have smiled weakly and let it go, but now he kept his posture tall, smiled faintly, and said, "If I could just finish my thought, I think it will make more sense." The room went silent for a second. The partner raised an eyebrow, then leaned back and gestured for him to continue. Ethan spoke, steady and unshaken. By the end, even the partner was nodding. In the days that followed, Ethan noticed subtle changes. Colleagues greeted him first in the hallway. In meetings, people stopped multitasking when he spoke. At lunch, coworkers pulled up chairs at his table. It wasn't luck. It was his new presence, deliberate pauses, steady eye contact, and genuine curiosity about others. He realized that the more value he gave to conversations, the more others valued him. On a crisp Friday evening, Ethan met Sarah at a rooftop cafe in Brooklyn. The Manhattan skyline stretched out behind her like a painting. She watched him talk about his week, then laughed. "You've changed, Ethan. People actually look for you now." He grinned. "Feels strange, like I've been here all along, but now they finally see me." Sarah raised her coffee cup in a mock toast. "Welcome to the visible world." As they sipped their drinks, Sarah leaned in. "It's science, really. The human brain is a survival machine. It notices things that can help or hurt us and ignores everything else. High presence sends a signal. Pay attention." Ethan nodded slowly. "So it was never personal." "Exactly," she said. "It was just biology. You weren't on their radar. Now you are." 2 weeks later, at a networking night in Philadelphia, Ethan noticed a young man sitting alone at the far corner of the room. He was scrolling nervously through his phone, shoulders hunched, eyes avoiding everyone. It was like looking into a mirror from a year ago. Ethan walked over, smiled warmly, and said, "Mind if I join you?" The man's eyes widened in surprise. Within minutes, they were deep in conversation. By the time Ethan introduced him to a small group nearby, the man's voice had grown steadier, his posture taller. Helping someone else be seen felt even better than being noticed himself. A month later, Ethan stood backstage at a major marketing conference in Chicago. The low hum of hundreds of conversations filled the air. When his name was called, he walked out under the spotlight, the stage lights warm on his face. He spoke with calm authority, his voice carrying to the back of the hall. He used pauses like punctuation, letting his words land. When he finished, the applause was strong, and the line of people waiting to speak to him afterward was even stronger. This was no accident. This was presence. That night, Ethan walked along the Chicago River. City lights shimmered on the water, reflecting like gold threads. He thought about how little had changed on the outside. Same clothes, same job, same city. But the inside, that had transformed everything. He was no longer asking a "why don't they notice me?" He knew the answer. Ethan stopped at the railing, watching the water flow beneath the bridges. He whispered to himself, "If you don't value your own presence, no one else will." Attention isn't owed, it's earned. He realized that being noticed wasn't about shouting louder or dominating the room. It was about showing without words why you mattered in that space. A week later, back in New York, Ethan walked into another high-profile networking event. The crowd was as loud and fast-moving as ever. Clinking glasses, laughter, handshakes. But this time he didn't rush to introduce himself. He carried himself with quiet confidence, scanning the room slowly. Heads began to turn. A few people smiled, approaching him first. Ethan returned their smiles, not because he needed the attention, but because he finally noticed himself. The man who once felt invisible had become unforgettable. Love real psychology stories that reveal the truth about human behavior? Hit that subscribe button so you never miss a new episode. If today's story helped you understand yourself or others better, like and share it with friends who need to hear this. Your support keeps these powerful stories coming every week.